Morning, everybody. Hopefully, we're going to have someone else joining us in just a second. There he is. Woo! Yay! Morning, everyone. Happy More Tory Sleaze Day, and welcome to the news agenda with me, Fleet Street Fox. And today, I've been joined by the Mirror's online political editor, Dan Bloom. Morning, Dan.
Morning.
And we're going to take you through the biggest stories of the day. And through it all, we want you to ask us your questions. So dig into the comments, tell us whatever's burning a hole in your head about Matt Hancock and his options for the future. And we'll do our best to explain what's going on for you. Can't answer them all, but we will answer the best ones. So what have we got this morning? Well, Matt Hancock has been thoroughly spatchcocked in that his carcass has been opened, the spine removed, and he's been flattened ready for cooking, with a torrid weekend of revelations about the health secretary and his adulterous flame, Gina Coladangelo. So good when they've got Italian names, isn't it? Now, there's more than one allegation outstanding against him, but the one the Mirror splashed on today is partly this £16,000 golden goodbye he is entitled to as a resigning minister. Now, Dan, it's an entitlement. If he's got any sense, he won't accept it because his new inamorata is a millionairess. He's not in need of the money, but is he going to take it?
Well, sure enough, after Labour said that it would be disgusting for him to take the money yesterday, there's some briefings come out overnight that actually he's not going to take it. Funnily enough, the Mirror didn't hear that one. What a surprise. But my understanding this morning is he doesn't intend to take the money. He's not made any kind of sort of public statement about that or on the record. And we only find out the true answer in the Department of Health accounts next summer in 2022. But no, I mean, Matt Hancock is a pretty wealthy man outside of his job, and he maybe doesn't need it.
He's about to be only half as wealthy. So
well, I was going to say he might need it when he has his divorce, if that one's coming up. But if he's got any political sense and he wants to regain a job, he perhaps wouldn't take the 16,000. So it would make sense that what we're hearing this morning is perhaps he's not going to take it after that outcome.
Yes. Now, speaking of political sense, the thing that occurred to me, and that's probably betraying my age, when I heard about his immediate dumping of his wife on Thursday night, poor woman, was it reminded me of Robin Cook and Gaynor Regan back in the 90s, I think it was, or early noughties, when he got a phone call about a newspaper splashing his affairs. He was feeding his girlfriend's parking meter, if you remember, outside her flat. He was at the airport with his wife about to go on holiday, and he hung up on Alistair Campbell and turned around and told her the marriage was over after however many decades. And there's this kind of political consideration that, well, it seems to be a political consideration that if you are if you are someone who's a fairly normal human being, at least you would spend a week or two seeing if you could fix it with your wife first. But if you are a politician who wants to rehabilitate your career, you have to have a clean break, sharp, move on to the next one, and say that it's a love match and it's just one of those things, kind of as opposed to a fling or something else, and try and rehabilitate yourself as you go forward. Is that the choice Hancock's made? He's a very political beast, isn't
he? He's extremely political. I was going to say, I remember the 90s. I had a lovely primary school.
You shut up.
Rub it in. But yeah, I mean, he has just flipped like a switch, and all the reports are that his wife, who I feel extremely sorry for, had no idea that this was, in the offing, going to happen. And he'd even said in interviews that, she'd sort of, I'm not sure if these are words, but borne the brunt of a lot of him being at work for however many hours a day trying to deal with the pandemic. Yeah. So, yeah, perhaps it is a sort of having to look decisive type thing. Perhaps it's true love, and perhaps we're being cynical, Susie. But
perhaps. But perhaps Mrs. Hancock would like a copy of my book, The Diaries of a Fleet Street Fox, in which we discuss exactly this kind of situation.
Good product placement there.
Yes, there we go. Now, Martin says, leave him alone. He tried his best. We don't know with whom, but he was certainly trying very hard with Gina in that video we all had to sit through excruciatingly, although the one with the Alan Partridge voiceover was the best, if you ask me.
Well, I think some people will take Martin's opinion. That's totally fine. He obviously tried very hard during the pandemic. He was working very long hours. No one really denies that. The question I'd pick up on, though, is the one that came just before Martin's one. That if we can see it again, why was he not sacked earlier? Because actually the questions more than for Matt Hancock at the moment, there we go, thanks Val, are for Boris Johnson. because he has a pattern of not sacking people who are alleged to have done something very wrong or even admitted breaking the rules. You know, he spent so much political capital keeping Dominic Cummings last year. Priti Patel was found by a report to have been behind behaviour that constituted bullying and would have breached the ministerial code. He overturned that report and said, I personally do not believe she broke the ministerial code, she denies bullying, and therefore she can stay. Same story again with Robert Jenrick, the housing secretary, who I think recused himself sort of belatedly from a decision on a billionaire donor's development because there was apparent bias. Now, he says there was no actual bias, but all these texts between him and the developer came out, and there were emails between civil servants saying this has to be put through because the Secretary of State wants it done before a new community levy kicks in. Again, Robert Jenrick toughed it out, said, I've done nothing wrong. Boris Johnson keeps him in a job. So it's a question of, I think Labour have called him spineless. You know, how much leadership and authority do you have to be able to sack someone or keep someone on?
Yeah. Now, Michael says, it's like that old TV programme. It's called Hancock's Half Hour. Please don't make rude puns in the comments, everybody. We would hate that. Now, it does...
Facebook Live.
Really. Yeah, exactly. It does go, though, as you say, to the judgment of the Prime Minister. Keir Starmer's been putting out some statements about this yesterday, that Boris should have sacked him immediately on Friday. Now, everyone who saw those photos, or had to endure those photos on Friday, knew pretty much instantly he was going to have to go. He couldn't, you know, how could he really brazen it out? But Boris did try to brazen it out and laughably said it was a matter of principle, which is about the only principle he's ever displayed. But has Boris been damaged by trying to protect Hancock? Because there's an awful lot of backbenchers who didn't like that at all.
Well, I think our regular commenter, Mike Holden, probably picks up on one of the problems here, that if it was purely about an adulterous affair, I'm not quite sure that Boris Johnson can hold the moral high ground on that one and say that anyone who has an affair should be sacked, given that he himself was sacked for lying about an affair. I think it was in 2004. So perhaps he's still smarting about that one. It's just, it's very, it's difficult for Boris Johnson because, you know, he has been accused. There are multiple times when he hasn't sort of followed the probity rules in Parliament about declaring things on time and all that sort of thing. And if he starts getting morally sort of righteous on other people, then he's going to have it reflect back on him.
Exactly, and they're not going to take it very easily from them because there are an awful lot of very principled people in the Tory backbenches, some very religious people as well, who don't like this kind of thing at all. But you don't really publish a story on Friday unless you've got a Saturday and a Sunday version also in the bag, and maybe a Monday too for preference. And by today, we have learned he may have taken his lover to a G7 meeting of health ministers earlier this month. There's allegations now that he may have used a private email account to conduct government business. And Dan, call me a bit suspicious if you like, but if you've got a government phone and a government computer, surely the government can see all your doings regardless of the email account you're using.
Well, I think it's not so much about whether people could see if they absolutely needed to, like the security services and stuff. I'm sure they can see everything. It's more about the transparency of information and how it's obtained. So there's a whole policy with government emails where they have to be archived in a certain way. Personal emails don't have to be. The same with freedom of information requests. There was a long battle over this 9 years ago when Michael Gove was using a personal email account to basically kind of do political stuff off the grid with Dominic Cummings, funnily enough, who was his aide at the time. And there was a big legal battle over it. And the Information Commissioner ruled that private emails, if it's government business, they should be open to scrutiny on a private email. However, the actual process of getting those emails is really turgid and difficult. And the chances are the person who's doing it can get away with it by the time they're asked to hand over their certain private emails to the government. And of course, it's not that the government goes in and searches your private email. It's that you, as the minister, get asked, could you please give us any emails that relate to this? So it relies on the person's honesty. So it's just a load of barriers to kind of proper probity and openness of government. Now, Department of Health say, we asked them, has Matt Hancock ever used a private email for government business? Ever. We asked them twice, and they gave us a statement saying all ministers only use government email for government business. They didn't address Hancock directly. They just said all ministers.
He's not a government minister anymore, so they could well have.
Well, but I mean, yeah, maybe careful use of the present tense. That would be a very cynical way of looking at it, Susie, though.
Yeah, I've been a journalist for 25 years. Now, Martin says, isn't our government accountable to any higher body? They should be. It's the highest body in the country, Martin. That's kind of the point of the damn thing. But it is accountable to the voter, Dan. Is this going... We haven't seen the polls since this has all happened, but is this going to damage them?
Well, we've had the issue before where sleaze, the whole thing around Boris Johnson's flat and donors and that kind of thing, and Greensill, of course, lobbying as well. There were a lot of polls done in the wake of that, and they didn't seem to cut through particularly. Now, the problem you've got with that is just because it doesn't have an impact on the polls, it doesn't mean it's not important, and it doesn't mean we shouldn't be reporting it. And actually, you can't just base something on whether it has an instant feedback reaction on the polls 2 weeks later. This is all about building up a more accurate picture of a culture in government, which might have an effect a year or two down the line. But as journalists, that's not our intention to sway the polls one way or the other. Our intention is to expose what's going on if something wrong is going on. And the problem is you've got Tory ministers lining up now. Robert Buckland in a very feisty interview this morning saying that, essentially peddling the line that if something isn't cutting through, then we should be what's important to the public in a minister's view. And people don't care about this, therefore let's stop talking about it. And it's complete rubbish, if you ask me, because people only care about something once it is exposed. So if you don't ask questions about it, of course people won't care because they only have a sort of scrappy level of detail on it.
Yeah.
One more thing on it because it winds me up. But, of course, there are a lot of people who won't give a fig about Matt Hancock's private life and who he kisses in his office and who he sleeps with. That is not what this story is about. It does add an extra level of sort of pizzazz, if you like, to the story. It gets people's attention. But the actual story is about how did this person, who was a university friend, get a £15,000 a year job in government? Was Matt Hancock involved in that? Did he declare the relationship? Because if not, that could be a breach of the ministerial code. How did this all happen? Why did Matt Hancock avoid questions about it by resigning? There's a load of things we still don't know. And most importantly, this was a hypocrisy because it was a breach of COVID rules. It was before you were allowed to hug indoors and when indoor gatherings were illegal. It's all of on top of the sort of moralistic element of it.
Yeah. And let's not forget, everyone who says that it's a fair doesn't matter and so on and so forth. There are hundreds of thousands of people who were kept apart from their loved ones in care homes, who were not able to hug each other at funerals, including the Queen and the royal family, and who weren't able to attend weddings and so on and so forth for a year and a half under this man's instructions. So the fact that he is happily groping someone from another household makes a lot of people furious. Now, Tony says anybody with a brain cell knows the affair story was planned and leaked so he could resign before all the information came out. That's it, Tony. Yeah, he's done all of this willingly. This whole humiliating weekend was Matt Hancock's idea. For the info could come out about dodgy deals, private email addresses, the COVID balls up. It's a scam. He'll walk away now and everyone will only remember an alleged affair. There's a point, I think, to Tony's last bit there about only remembering the alleged affair. But, 30 years ago, we had back to basics, Tory sleaze, and it does look like they have got a bit back to basics. And that kind of sleaze thing did stick a lot more than some of the scandals that the Tories then had to face back in the 90s with Neil Hamilton and cash for questions and stuff like that. It's the sleaze people remember, but it's the sleaze that did them down in the end with the voters. So maybe the alleged affair would have more impact than some of the other more justifiably wrong things that we're going to be talking about. And Michelle says, what's just as worrying is the fact video footage from a government office has been leaked. What else has? the Tories are worried about this, aren't they? And government ministers are sweeping their offices to see who else has sent them up to goodness knows what. Now, there's obviously a clear moral argument that ministers should be able to operate in privacy when they're doing government business. We don't want the Russians looking at them. But then again, what are they really worried about? How many other ministers are going to have some concerns about what people may have seen in their private offices, do we think?
I mean, you could take that view that, they've all been shagging and snogging and the rest of it, and that's why they don't want it. But I think Michelle has a point. There is a genuine national security, or at least kind of data security issue here, because if it was a standard CCTV camera which has strict monitoring on it, and and I'm completely making this up, don't take anything from it, but if the CCTV operator was the person who leaked it, for example, that would raise obviously big questions for the CCTV operator. Are they a whistleblower, or are they scurrilous, etc., etc.? But that would be a controlled system in which the CCTV is, has a whole system through which it goes through. It can't just be seen by anyone in the department, leaked to foreign powers, all that sort of thing. I think what ministers are concerned about is there are unanswered questions here about exactly who was seeing this footage. How could it be leaked out? Does it record audio? Most CCTV cameras don't, but if they did, that would be a big...
I don't ever want to hear the audio of that.
Well, not of Matt Hancock, but if it's the Defence Secretary having a meeting in the MOD, that would be a very different thing, wouldn't it? And you bloody well hope that their security is a hell of a lot better in there than it is in the health department.
Yeah, well, I would make a random stab, and again, don't know anything about how this footage came out, but I'd make a random stab in my experience that quite often someone who sees something like this might record it, sends it to a mate, and it's the mate who ends up taking things to the newspaper. Because the first one is, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to get in trouble, and I don't care enough. But someone thinks that it may be a story later on, and that's how it gets out. In which case, the original person hasn't really done anything too wrong. But Mike says, if politicians don't have to behave with honesty or decency, if it doesn't cost them votes, why should anyone behave with honesty or decency? That's very cynical, Mike. I don't think the whole world's gone to hell just because Matt Hancock has done what he had to do. Who resigned? Michael says. Oh, catch up, Michael. Google it. For the last 20 minutes, we've been telling you who's resigned.
But maybe that's like a sort of postmodern question with who really resigned? Who really
resigned? Who resigned for him? Who knows? It wasn't Boris anyway. I wonder what Boris has been up to on security cameras. But there's a blackmail issue as well, isn't there? If someone did see it, they could have blackmailed a minister into doing something or other for them, giving a mate a contract or something. There's big issues. There's a reason that we expect our politicians to behave better than this, and there's a problem with it. It's not just an adultery thing, it's other stuff as well. Now, we do need to go on to another story because we've been here for 20 minutes. Keep asking us your questions. What do you think is going to happen next to Matt Hancock? Is he going to just walk away from this, or is there going to be scandal after scandal coming out of it now? Is he going to start screaming from the back benches about stuff Boris Johnson's been doing for the pandemic? Who knows? Is he going to start burning the house down on his way out? But we need to talk about Labour's battle in Batley and Spen, the upcoming by-election. So the shoe may be on the other foot before long, because the opposition battle to win there, where Jo Cox's sister Kim Ledbetter there is having an uphill battle with the Tories in the Red Wall. Dan, this is your story. You've been up there. How's it going? How's it looking for her?
It's not looking simple because she is, by all accounts, quite a well-known, quite strong and sort of feisty and energetic candidate. And we met people in the high street. We talked to people who were saying, "Oh, I don't like any of them, but I'll vote for Kim because of she's done lots locally and she's been around for a while. She was born and bred in the constituency, etc." So we found quite a lot of sort of apathy for Labour generally, but excitement for her. Now, in normal times, that might be enough to carry the result across the line. However, you've got George Galloway coming in, and by all accounts, he's almost exclusively targeting Labour voters, people who did vote Labour before. And his sort of key issues are sort of focused largely on the Muslim community in Batley and Spen, which is about sort of a fifth, a quarter of the people in the seat. So a very sizable number of people with serious concerns about Palestine, about Kashmir, and about Islamophobia. Now, it would be ridiculous of anyone to say that the Muslim community are one homogenous group with one set of opinions. That is, frankly, a bigoted, prejudiced thing to say. We talked to some people who said that Labour are not doing enough, that George Galloway is the only one speaking up on these issues. We spoke to other people who said, don't believe what George Galloway has to say. Kim Leadbeater will also address these issues, but also address all the local issues, and she's a local person and will stick around after the circus is gone. That's actually in her words as well. So it's difficult. I think what it boils down to is, will George Galloway take enough Labour votes for the Tories to win on the basis of a split vote? Mathematically, that could happen quite easily, because the margin in 2019 was just over 3,000 votes between Labour and the Tories, although there was quite a heavy vote, a sort of 6,000 vote for an independent candidate. So there's a lot of unknown there. But given that turnout is very, very low in a by-election, we talked to a lot of people who said, I don't think I'll bother voting this time. What it seems like is you only need a few thousand Labour voters to switch to George Galloway to sort of ruin it for Labour and let the Tories essentially give a clear run at the job. And we've talked to Labour people, off the record, who kind of fear that this could happen. And so Kim, the candidate who I spoke to last Wednesday, before a lot of the sort of nastier stuff kicked off in the campaign over the weekend, fake leaflets saying Labour wants to get rid of whiteness and really horrible stuff. She basically said she's trying to keep it local, keep it positive, and give them and don't believe everything you read on Twitter. It's always more positive than the viral videos on Twitter. But she's having a bit of a difficulty with that in the last few days.
Yeah, as we can see there, some of the footage, you've got Andy Burnham, Rachel Reeves, Keir Starmer have always turned out, and Lisa Nandy there, some of the Labour big hitters have turned up to support her. I don't know what kind of impact they'll have in Batley and Spen. Andy Burnham probably got more than anything else. And even if, no matter what happens in that by-election, Tracy Brabin, the last Labour MP, is going to be the local Metro Mayor and probably have more power and influence over the lives of people in Batley and Spen than any MP. But what happens if Labour loses, if Kim loses? What happens if the Tories lose? Because they would have failed in the red wall, which that Boris is supposed to be so good at. What happens to George Galloway as well? Does he finally go away, or would he regenerate? What's in the future after the vote?
Well, I'll say first that given the number of people who shouted this at me preemptively in Batley, I'm under a contractual obligation to say that it is not the red wall. And it's kind of a different thing to that. It only turned red in 1997, and it's part of that narrative. It's a different sort of place. But to your main question, I think nationally, if Labour lose it, it would inevitably turn to Keir Starmer's leadership. How has he lost 2 by-elections in the space of 3 months to the ruling party, because that's how it would almost certainly go, despite George Galloway thinking that he can actually win it. Unfortunately, and this isn't me, peddling a media narrative, if the Tories lose it, there probably wouldn't be an enormous reckoning for Boris Johnson. And the reason for that is A, because the Tories didn't hold the seat already. B, they're the ruling party, and ruling parties don't really gain in a by-election historically. And C, the candidate has been, by all accounts, very low profile. Newsnight went out and he didn't get interviewed by them. He lives on the other side of Leeds and that sort of thing. So they have. I talked to local activists who sort of said that it's been a bit of a submarine campaign. They're deliberately keeping their heads down, not getting drawn into arguments with George Galloway and that sort of thing, not making headlines, and just hoping that the vote splits between Labour and George Galloway.
Without having to do anything or spend any money. It's interesting. Phil says, no point in voting Labour. They're not a party of opposition. They're a party of collusion. Yeah, okay, Phil. And what happens to George Galloway then? Because he will lose. He's not going to win, surely. So does he go away and just fight the next by-election with a heavy Muslim area, or what happens to him?
from being a cat on Celebrity Big Brother, which most of us had watched, to the by-election he's fighting now. I think it's pretty obvious that George Galloway is capable of regenerating himself and going off and fighting a battle elsewhere. He's not going to go away if he doesn't win this by-election. He has lost other by-elections before, and he's caused upsets before, so I'm sure we will see more of him.
We've all had a horrible weekend watching Matt Hancock get his leg over. And now you've had to remind us all of the previous most horrible political thing we ever saw. So thanks for that, Dan. It's Monday morning. It's 9:28. None of us needed to recall George Galloway and his leotard, but there we are. It's in my head now. Now, keep asking us your questions. What do you think is the future holds for Kim Ledbetter in Batley and Spen? What do you think is going to happen with Matt Hancock? Is it all going to go quiet? Is stuff going to keep rumbling on? Is he going to speak out from the back benches? But first off, we've got some good news we want to give you. And here it is. There's not just Matt Hancock who's been getting lucky. Now, despite his instruction to not meet a lover from another household, Olga Fleming, aged 80, and John Wood, aged 90, have managed to get around the restrictions by falling in love inside their care home. Now, the couple live in a home in Bradford, and neither expected to find love at their stage of life. But Dan, this all gives a bit new meaning to living in a bubble. Thank goodness Matt Hancock did throw that protective arm around care homes so these two could spend a lot more time together. Isn't it sweet?
Well, I'm not going to comment on the protective ring that didn't exist, but no, it's a lovely story. It's just, the quotes from them. This is the moment when I say go out and buy today's Mirror and just read it, because it's, Olga says, knowing you have a companion that's as madly in love with you as you are with them, it's like a breath of fresh air. It's changed my life and I feel complete. It's just lovely because, especially over the last year and a half, I think we've had this image in the media of, us included, helped along by the terrible COVID situation, as sort of care homes as this terrible, defeatist, drab places where people are essentially shut in and locked inside like a prison, and a lot of people have died. So, anyone who has a relative or a partner's relative, or as I do as well, in some kind of care or supported living, the moment you meet that person, you will see them after a long time. It comes flooding back that these are all people with fascinating histories and stories and personalities, and a lot to teach us, the younger generation. And it's just so heartbreaking how they've been sort of shut away and forgotten about in the last year.
But those two, luckily, have managed to make the best of it. And there's a good quote there from the home's manager, Lorraine Tink, who says, "This is misconception. Care homes are about the end of lives. They can't hide their smiles. It's infectious. It's just people who are living their lives is the most important thing." John says there, "It's a dream come true." That's absolutely lovely. What a lovely note to finish on after a weekend of yuck. Thank you for watching, everybody. Thank you for joining me, Dan. Do tune back in, everybody, on Wednesday. We're going to have an extra super special edition of the news agenda for you, so don't miss it. See you then. Bye-bye.